You know, it's kind of crazy to think about it. Just a few years ago,
Yeah.
the world felt so predictable. You know, trade was like humming along.
Right.
Alliances felt, pretty unshakable.
Yeah.
And now, well, let's just say things are shifting faster than, tectonic plates.
It really is fascinating how all these seemingly disconnected events on a global scale are actually deeply intertwined.
Right.
It's like a delicate house of cards.
Oh, yeah.
One wrong move,
Yeah.
and the whole structure could just come tumbling down.
All right, so let's unpack some of these major shifts, starting with what I'm calling the tariff earthquake.
Ooh.
Out of the blue,
Yeah.
President Trump slapped a 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico.
Wow.
And a 10% on goods from China.
Huge.
I mean, we're talking a seismic impact on everything, from the cars we drive
Right.
to even those incredibly complex Dutch lithography machines
Oh, yeah.
that produce the chips in our smartphones and computers.
It's amazing how much reliance
It is, yeah.
we have on these things.
And most people don't even know what they are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're essential but invisible.
Totally invisible, yeah.
And it's also important to understand here that this goes far beyond simple economics.
Right.
This is a calculated power move by the U.S. to really fundamentally reshape the landscape of global trade.
I mean, are we talking about like bringing back? It's about bringing manufacturing back to American shores. Yeah.
Wow.
Potentially rewinding the clock to a time when the U.S. held a much tighter grip on the reins of global production.
I see.
Remember how Britain attempted something similar back in the 1930s?
Yeah.
Well,
this
is a parallel on a much larger scale.
But imagine the domino effect.
Right.
The EU.
Yeah.
Which has been coasting on favorable trade deals
for years. Yeah.
Is now left scrambling.
It's true.
It's like they've suddenly woken up to a whole new reality.
It's a rude awakening.
It is a rude awakening.
For sure. Yeah. This begs the question.
Yeah.
Is this merely a temporary tremor? Or are we witnessing the dawn of a new protectionist era?
Right.
The answer could have a ripple effect on the global economy and really reshape how countries interact and trade with each other for decades to come.
And all of this is unfolding against a backdrop of a Europe in complete disarray.
Yeah.
Leaders are reeling from Trump's aggressive moves, grappling with the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, dealing with their own internal political storms.
It's a mess.
France is on the verge of a meltdown.
Oh, yeah.
Germany's facing a nail-biting election, and it feels like there's a leadership vacuum at the heart of Europe.
It's palpable.
It is, yes.
This inherent weakness plays right into Putin's hands. He sees this fragmented Europe as an open invitation for American manipulation, making them far less likely to put up any resistance to Trump's agenda. And don't even get me started on that cutting remark Putin made about today's European leaders.
I know.
He called them men and women of no special consequence.
What a burn.
Talk about a power play.
It's a classic Putin move.
It is.
You know?
Yeah.
That pretty much sums up the current state of affairs.
Right.
A Europe seemingly adrift.
Yeah.
And a Russia sensing an opportunity.
Totally.
Now, let's shift our focus to the conflict in Ukraine. Which has really become the epicenter for so many of these seismic global shifts.
Like the whole world order is being tested.
It's true.
In the crucible of this conflict.
It's like this conflict has ripped open a Pandora's box of vulnerabilities.
Right.
You're seeing Europe's reliance on the U.S. for security laid bare.
Yeah.
Cracks in the Western alliance widening by the day. And just this cascade of unforeseen consequences rippling outwards.
It's scary.
And here's where things take a truly shocking turn. Zelensky is making some explosive allegations.
Oh, really?
He claims that a staggering $100 billion in aid for Ukraine has simply vanished.
Hold on a second.
Poof, gone without a trace.
Are you serious?
I am.
That's an unbelievable amount of money.
It is a mind-boggling sum.
I mean, is Zelensky trying to deflect blame?
Possibly.
As the situation in Ukraine deteriorates?
It's a classic tactic.
And what about those unsettling reports of ghost soldiers, and widespread corruption within the Ukrainian military.
It's concerning.
It's beginning to feel like the whole situation is unraveling.
Yeah.
At an alarming pace.
This financial scandal could very well be the death knell for U.S. support.
Yeah.
There's already talk of a for-loan audit, and nobody wants to be left holding the bag when the music stops.
So where do we even find ourselves amidst all of this? This like maelstrom of change?
Yeah.
Are we witnessing the demise of the globalized U.S.-led order?
It's a question a lot of people are asking.
As we know it.
Yeah.
Is this the beginning of a new chapter?
It could be.
In history.
This conflict has the potential to completely redraw the global power map.
Okay.
Imagine a world where Russia reclaims its position as a major force, standing shoulder to shoulder with the U.S. and China.
All right.
And then there's the wild card, India.
Oh, yeah.
A rising giant with aspirations of its own.
Yeah.
These powerhouses could very well be the ones calling the shots.
Interesting.
In the years to come.
And then there's Europe.
Yeah.
Picture a Europe where Russia exerts significant influence. Not just militarily. But economically and politically as well.
A complete realignment.
I mean, this would require a complete reimagining of how nations interact.
It's a whole new game.
And where their allegiances lie. And how they navigate the treacherous waters of international relations.
We're talking about a fundamental shift in the global landscape. A paradigm shift that could reshape the 21st century.
Wow, okay. All of this is a lot to absorb.
It is a lot to take in.
But let's bring it down to earth for a moment.
Right.
What does this all mean for, you, the listener, on a practical level? What can you do to navigate this uncharted territory?
The key takeaway here is to be adaptable and flexible.
Okay.
The old rule book has been thrown out the window.
Yeah.
Question everything.
Right.
And anticipate the unexpected.
Got it.
In this emerging world order, the only certainty is change itself.
That's true.
Be prepared to adapt.
Yeah.
To learn.
Okay.
And to rethink your assumptions.
Right.
About how the world works.
Okay. That's a wrap for part 1 of our deep dive into this rapidly changing world order.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is.
Yeah.
Take a moment to process all of this.
Right.
And we'll be back soon to explore these issues even further.
Sounds good. So, we've covered a lot of ground already.
We have.
But there's still so much to explore.
Yeah. Where do we go from here?
Well, let's delve deeper into the fallout from these tariffs.
Okay.
The reaction has been swift and fierce.
Oh, yeah.
With critics arguing that these tariffs will disrupt intricate supply chains, lead to price hikes for consumers, and ultimately backfires, harming the U.S. economy.
Yeah, those articles are everywhere.
They're all over the place.
They paint a picture of President Trump as a leader stuck in the past.
Right.
Someone who doesn't grasp the complexities of global trade.
The criticism is that he's out of touch.
Yeah, and some even predict he'll be forced to backpedal.
That he'll have to cave to the pressure.
Yeah.
It's remarkable how these criticisms echo the arguments against protectionist policies throughout history.
Interesting.
Remember Joseph Chamberlain in Britain in the early 1900s? He faced a similar wave of pushback when he proposed tariffs to shield British industries.
Didn't he end up losing an election?
He did.
Because of those tariffs.
In 1906, the British public was terrified of higher prices.
Yeah.
Especially for essentials like bread.
Right.
But here's the twist.
Okay.
Britain eventually embraced protectionist policies in the 1930s. And contrary to those dire predictions, they didn't trigger runaway inflation.
Really?
In fact, they coincided with a period of industrial resurgence.
So are we witnessing history repeating itself?
It's a possibility.
I mean, is this a sign that those who oppose these tariffs are simply on the wrong side of history?
Well, not necessarily.
Okay.
It serves as a powerful reminder that economic predictions are often flawed.
Right.
And sometimes unconventional strategies can yield surprising results.
Interesting.
It's important to remember that the U.S. economy has been on shaky ground for a while now.
It has, yeah.
With mounting debt, financial instability, and signs of deindustrialization.
Yeah, it does make you pause and consider if a radical shakeup was truly necessary.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
And what's striking is that there doesn't seem to be a viable alternative plan on the table.
Right.
So it's like, what's the option?
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, so let's shift gears and look at the global response.
Okay.
How are other countries reacting to these tariffs?
Yeah, what's the word on the street?
Well, as you might expect, there's a wave of anxiety, particularly in Europe. They've become accustomed to those favorable trade deals with the U.S., and now they're facing the prospect of tariffs on their exports.
It's a tough pill to swallow.
It's a real blow.
Yeah.
Especially given their already precarious situation.
And let's not forget the energy crisis.
Oh, right.
They're grappling with after cutting off Russian gas and oil.
Talk about a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it's like they're shooting themselves in the foot.
The irony is that many of the European leaders who were championing sanctions against Russia are now the ones feeling the squeeze from U.S. tariffs.
It's like they didn't think it through.
It's almost as if they didn't anticipate the potential blowback.
It seems like they underestimated the interconnectedness of the global economy.
They did.
You know how actions taken in one part of the world can have unexpected consequences elsewhere?
Precisely, actions have consequences.
Yeah.
And what's particularly worrisome for Europe is the potential for the U.S. to restrict high technology exports.
Okay.
Remember those Dutch lithography machines we discussed earlier?
The ones that make the chips.
The ones that are vital for producing advanced computer chips?
Right.
Well, they rely heavily on U.S. patents and technology.
So is the U.S. really considering cutting them off?
It's a real possibility.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty extreme measure.
It would be a major escalation.
Yeah.
And such a move would have a devastating impact on Europe's ability to manufacture advanced chips.
Right.
And remain competitive in the tech sector.
So basically the U.S. is saying, look, we're not sharing our technological toys anymore.
Essentially, yeah.
Wow, it sounds like the gloves are truly coming off in this economic showdown.
Indeed.
So while Europe struggles to adapt, it seems Russia is weathering the storm with surprising resilience.
They are.
Recent data reveals that their manufacturing sector is actually expanding.
It's true.
Despite the sanctions.
Despite the sanctions.
Seriously, how are they managing that?
It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It does.
Well, it appears our economy is structured differently than Western economies.
Okay.
They have lower debt levels, and their government prioritizes key industries with preferential loans.
Interesting.
Plus, they've been strategically diversifying their trade partnerships.
Okay.
Focusing on countries like China and India.
So the sanctions aren't having the intended crippling effect?
Not entirely, no.
Wow.
The Russians have proven to be far more resilient than many anticipated.
They have, yeah.
They've adapted, innovated, and found ways to circumvent the sanctions.
It's like the world is engaged in this high-stakes game of chess.
It is a bit like a chess match.
With each move triggering a cascade of unforeseen consequences.
Every move has ripple effects.
It's hard to even keep track of all the moving pieces.
It's a complex and dynamic situation. And speaking of strategic moves, let's examine how the U.S. is leveraging its economic power to influence countries in its own backyard in what some call its sphere of influence.
You mean places like Colombia and Panama?
Yes. Exactly.
I recall reading something about the U.S. putting pressure on them.
Yes. There have been reports that the U.S. has pressured Colombia to accept return flights of migrants.
Right.
And that Panama has canceled a crucial servicing agreement for the Panama Canal with a Chinese company.
And didn't Panama also make the decision to withdraw from China's Belt and Road Initiative?
That's correct.
That massive global infrastructure project?
Yes, that's right.
It seems the U.S. is flexing its economic muscle.
It is.
To counter China's growing influence in the region.
It's a power play.
Pushing back against China's ambitious attempts to reshape the global landscape.
It's a geopolitical tug of war.
So is this the opening salvo in a new Cold War, this time with China as the adversary?
It's too early to definitively say. But the tensions are undeniably escalating.
They are, yeah.
And with the U.S. imposing tariffs on China, it's highly likely that China will seek to strengthen its partnerships with other countries, potentially forming a bloc with Russia and India.
It's almost as if the world is dividing into these distinct blocks or spheres of influence.
It's a distinct possibility.
Reminiscent of the Cold War era.
History may be rhyming.
Yeah.
And with the conflict in Ukraine showing no signs of resolution, the question that looms large is this.
Yeah.
What will the new world order look like?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And the answer may be closer than we think.
Closer than we realize.
Stay with us as we continue our deep dive into this evolving global landscape. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
Into this rapidly changing world order.
It's been quite a journey.
It has been. We've gone from trade wars to, political upheavals, from the rise of new power blocks to even the, potential for a new Cold War.
The world is definitely at a crossroads.
It is. And now it's time to focus on the conflict.
Okay.
that has become the epicenter of all these global shifts.
Right.
The war in Ukraine.
The conflict that's reshaping everything.
It really is. Yeah. As we delve deeper into this situation in Ukraine, it becomes increasingly evident that things are reaching a critical juncture.
They are.
I mean, the narrative of a potential Ukrainian victory is fading.
Yeah.
It's being replaced by a growing sense of urgency and uncertainty.
There's a lot of anxiety in the air.
There is, as cracks appear in the facade of unity.
You can sense the cracks widening.
I can. Yeah, and the mood has definitely shifted.
It has.
It feels less about how will Ukraine win and more about what happens next.
Right. It's shifted from optimism to a more pragmatic outlook.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And those questions are getting harder.
They are.
And harder to answer.
Yeah, especially for Zelensky and his government.
Especially for Zelensky. Yeah. Remember those recent revelations about the alleged misuse of aid money? I mean, those accusations have really shaken things up, haven't they?
They've really eroded trust.
They have,
and raised serious doubts about the long-term sustainability of Western support.
It's a PR nightmare.
It is.
It's a complete disaster.
I mean, first the reports of ghost soldiers and rampant corruption, and now this bombshell about missing aid money.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot for any leader to contend with.
It is.
Especially during a war.
Wartime leadership is incredibly challenging.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's hard to imagine how he can regain control of the narrative at this point.
The narrative has definitely slipped away from him.
It has.
Yeah.
I mean, he's still talking about NATO membership and security guarantees.
But those seem like distant dreams now.
They do, don't they? They do.
Yeah.
They seem increasingly unlikely.
They do. And his recent comments about being open to negotiations, they ring hollow.
They do, especially given his continued insistence on terms that are completely unacceptable to Russia.
Totally.
It's a difficult position to be in.
He's painted himself into a corner.
He has. Yeah. It's as if he's trapped in a time warp.
He is.
Clinging to a strategy that's no longer viable.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what his end game is at this point.
Yeah. What is he hoping to achieve?
Yeah.
It's unclear.
It is.
Meanwhile, the pressure on him is mounting from all sides.
Yeah.
The U.S. is subtly signaling a desire for a change in leadership with whispers of potential elections and a negotiated settlement.
I see.
Even some of his closest allies seem to be losing faith.
Wow. So is Zelensky's time in power coming to an end?
Well,
is this the beginning of the end for him?
It's certainly a possibility. We could see a scenario where the Russians achieve their military objectives. The U.S. brokers a deal behind closed doors.
Right.
And Zelensky's pressured to step aside.
Wow.
It wouldn't be the triumphant ending he envisioned.
It wouldn't?
But it might be the most realistic outcome at this point.
Okay.
A pragmatic solution to a complex problem.
So what happens to Ukraine in this scenario?
Well,
do they become a Russian puppet state?
It's unlikely that Russia would seek to directly control all of Ukraine.
Okay.
A more plausible outcome is some form of partition.
Okay.
A division of the country.
All right, so like the eastern and southern regions?
Yeah, the eastern and southern regions with their strong cultural and historical ties to Russia could become part of Russia or Russian-aligned entities, and the western regions.
Okay.
Those with a stronger European identity might seek closer ties with Europe, potentially even joining the EU.
So a divided Ukraine.
A country torn in two.
It's a heartbreaking thought.
It is a tragedy.
Yeah. But it's a reflection of the complex realities on the ground.
Right.
The deep divisions within Ukrainian society and the geopolitical forces at play.
So no easy answers.
No easy answers.
What about the rest of Europe? Yeah. How do they fit into this new world order? I mean, they've been caught in the crossfire of this conflict, haven't they?
They have. Europe is facing a period of profound uncertainty.
Yeah.
They're grappling with economic challenges, internal divisions, and a shifting relationship with the U.S.
It's a lot.
It is.
And the conflict in Ukraine has exposed their vulnerabilities.
Absolutely.
And forced them to confront some uncomfortable truths about their own position in the world.
Like their reliance on the U.S. for security.
Right.
And their inability to present a truly united front.
Exactly.
On the global stage.
And with the U.S. seemingly pivoting away from its traditional role as the guarantor of European security, Europe will need to rethink its strategic posture.
They may need to embrace a more pragmatic approach.
Okay.
One that acknowledges Russia's interests.
Right.
and seeks to find a way to coexist peacefully, even if it means making difficult compromises.
It's a tough road ahead for Europe.
It is. That sounds like a tall order.
It is.
Especially given the current levels of mistrust and animosity between Russia and the West.
There's a lot of baggage to overcome.
There is.
But it's essential for the long-term stability of Europe.
Okay.
They can't afford to remain caught in the crossfire of a U.S.-Russia rivalry.
It's a precarious position.
It is.
Yeah.
They need to forge their own path, one that prioritizes their own interests and security.
Wow. It's a sobering thought. It feels like we've entered a new era of geopolitical turbulence.
I think we have.
A time where the old certainties have vanished.
Yeah. The old rules no longer apply.
And the future is uncertain.
We're in uncharted territory.
We are. We've taken our listeners on quite a journey today, haven't we?
From trade wars to political upheaval, from the changing face of global power to the human cost of conflict.
It's been a lot to process.
It has.
Hopefully our listeners have gained some valuable insights along the way.
I hope so.
Insights that will help them make sense of this complex and rapidly changing world.
The world is in a state of flux.
It is. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to leave our listeners with?
Just this, remember that the world is more complex than it appears.
Okay.
Don't be afraid to challenge assumptions, to question the narratives you're presented with, and to seek out diverse perspectives.
Why?
The answers are rarely black and white.
Those are wise words.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been an enlightening conversation.
Likewise.
Subscribe to our podcast, which is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We are here to make things clear.